12 anti-ship missiles launch from Venezuelan coast targeting USS Carney. What happens next rewrites naval warfare doctrine. November 29, 2025, 4:23 a.m. local time, Caribbean Sea, 73 miles north of La Guaira, Venezuela. The USS Carney, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, maintains standard patrol patterns in international waters. Displacement, 9,200 tons. Length, 509 feet. Crew, 323 sailors. Mission, freedom of navigation operations ensuring maritime law remains enforced. The ship represented $1.8 billion in American naval power. What nobody expected was Venezuela's government deciding to test that power with lethal force. The Venezuelan military had been tracking the Carney for 16 hours. Coastal radar stations monitored every course change, every speed adjustment, every radio transmission. At the El Libertador naval base, 12 C-802 anti-ship missiles sat ready in their coastal launchers, Chinese-manufactured weapons, export variants sold to Venezuela in 2019 for $340 million. Each missile, 18 feet long, 1,543 pounds at launch. Warhead, 363 pounds of high explosive. Range, 75 miles. Speed, Mach 0.9. Sea skimming approach. Altitude, just 16 feet above the waves. Venezuelan Naval Command believed they had the advantage. The Carney was alone. No carrier group support within 400 miles. The nearest American reinforcements were docked in Mayport, Florida. Response time, minimum 8 hours. In their calculation, 12 missiles against one destroyer represented overwhelming force. The C-802 had sunk vessels before. In 2006, one struck the Israeli corvette Hanit during the Lebanon conflict. Significant damage. 4 sailors killed. The weapon's reputation was proven. Their confidence came from recent war games. Simulations showed that saturation attacks overwhelmed point defense systems. Fire enough missiles simultaneously, and some penetrate. Basic mathematics. The Carney's defensive capabilities were known: the Aegis combat system, the AN/SPI-1D radar, the SM-2 surface-to-air missiles. But intelligence assessments suggested the system could be saturated with sufficient simultaneous threats. What's your weapon of choice for naval defense? Type A for missile interceptors, Type B for close-in weapon systems. At 4:23 a.m., Venezuelan coastal defense batteries received the launch order: 12 missiles, simultaneous release. The launchers roared to life in sequence. Solid rocket boosters ignited. 12 columns of fire lit the pre-dawn darkness. The missiles accelerated rapidly. 0 to Mach 0.9 in 47 seconds. Their active radar seekers locked onto the Carney's distinctive radar signature. Target confirmed. Flight time to impact, 6 minutes 30 seconds. But what they didn't know was that the USS Carney wasn't standard configuration. The destroyer had departed Norfolk 3 weeks earlier with special modifications. The Pentagon had selected the Carney for operational testing of the Aegis Baseline 10 upgrade. This wasn't the standard Aegis system. This was next-generation integrated air and missile defense. The AN/SPY-6 radar replaced the older SPY-1D. Detection range, 50% greater. Tracking capacity, simultaneous engagement of 300 targets versus the previous 100. Processing power, exponentially faster threat assessment and response coordination. The modifications cost $47 million. Installation took 6 weeks at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The system had passed all testing parameters. What it hadn't faced was live combat. Venezuela was about to provide that test. Commander James Morrison commanded the Carney's Combat Information Center. His 12-person team monitored 6 large displays showing the tactical picture. At 4:23 a.m., the AN/SPI-6 radar detected 12 simultaneous missile launches from the Venezuelan coast. Range 73 miles. Bearing 187 degrees. Altitude profile sea skimming. Speed Mach 0.9. Threat assessment: hostile anti-ship missiles. Time to impact 6 minutes 28 seconds. The Aegis system didn't wait for human confirmation. Automated defense protocols engaged immediately. The tactical computer calculated optimal intercept solutions for all 12 threats. The solution required firing 24 SM-2 missiles in a layered defense pattern. First wave at maximum range, second wave at intermediate range. The vertical launch system cells opened in rapid sequence. At 4:23 and 40 seconds, the first SM-2 launched, then another, and another. The vertical launch cells fired every 1.2 seconds, 24 launches in 29 seconds. Each SM-2 cost $1.2 million. Total defensive salvo value, $28.8 million. But the mathematics of survival don't calculate cost. They calculate probability of kill. The SM-2 missiles accelerated to Mach 3.5. Their radar seekers acquired targets at maximum range. The first wave engaged at 47 miles from the Carney. 8 SM-2s targeted the leading 6 C-802 missiles, 2 interceptors per threat. The first impact occurred at 4:25 a.m. An SM-2 struck a C-802 head-on. Combined closing speed, Mach 4.4. The Venezuelan missile disintegrated. Debris scattered across half a mile of ocean. 5 seconds later, 3 more C-802s died. Direct hits, clean kills. The exploding warheads created fireballs visible for 20 miles. 2 C-802 missiles survived the first defensive wave. Their sea-skimming profiles had taken them below the optimal intercept zone. They continued inbound, speed unchanged, range to target 31 miles. The Aegis system adjusted automatically. The second wave of SM-2 missiles tracked the survivors. Intercept calculations updated every 0.3 seconds. The tactical computer accounted for sea state, wind velocity, target maneuvering. At 23 miles range, 4 SM-2s engaged the 2 surviving threats. Double redundancy, maximum probability of kill. Both C-802s exploded at 4:26 a.m. Total elapsed time from Venezuelan launch, 2 minutes 47 seconds. All 12 hostile missiles destroyed. 0 impacts on the Carney, 0 damage, 0 casualties. If you're enjoying this deep dive into modern warfare, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. The remaining 6 Venezuelan missiles never reached engagement range. They had launched on delayed sequences. The Aegis system tracked them from ignition, calculated their trajectories, allocated interceptors. The vertical launch system fired 12 more SM-2 missiles. Overkill by design. At 4:27 a.m., the final 6 C-802s met their interceptors between 41 and 38 miles from the Carney. The destroyer's crew watched on radar displays as every threat disappeared from the screen. 18 minutes of combat. 36 SM-2 missiles fired. 12 hostile missiles destroyed. Perfect defensive performance. The Aegis Baseline 10 system had validated every design parameter, but the engagement wasn't finished. Commander Morrison received authorization from 5th Fleet Headquarters at 4:31 a.m. Rules of engagement clear. Hostile action against U.S. Navy vessel constitutes act of war. Response authorized. He ordered tactical action. The Carney carried 68 Tomahawk cruise missiles in its vertical launch cells. Each Tomahawk 18 feet long. 2,900-pound launch weight. Warhead 1,000 pounds of high explosive. Range 1,000 miles. Speed Mach 0.74, GPS guidance accurate to within 10 feet, cost per missile $1.9 million. The destroyer's combat system had already identified 12 high-value targets along the Venezuelan coast. At 4:34 a.m., the Carney fired its response, 12 Tomahawk missiles, one for each hostile missile Venezuela had launched. The launches occurred in rapid sequence, every 3 seconds. Another cell opened, another Tomahawk erupted skyward. The missiles climbed to cruise altitude of 500 feet, their terrain-following guidance systems activated. The targets, every coastal defense battery that had fired at the Carney. Flight time, 41 minutes. The Tomahawks crossed the Venezuelan coastline at 5:15 a.m. Their guidance systems processed terrain data at 600 calculations per second. First target, El Libertador Naval Base. The missile descended to 50 feet. Terminal velocity, 550 miles per hour. Impact at 5:15 and 23 seconds. The warhead detonated in the center of the missile battery complex. The explosion measured on seismic monitors 40 miles inland. 11 more Tomahawks struck within the next 4 minutes. Coastal radar installations, command bunkers, missile storage facilities, launch platforms, each target identified, each target engaged, each target destroyed. The precision was surgical. No collateral damage to civilian infrastructure. No strikes on population centers. Pure military targeting based on international law of armed conflict. The Venezuelan military's coastal defense network ceased to exist by 5:19 a.m. Total engagement time from first hostile launch to final American strike, 56 minutes. Venezuelan losses, 12 missile launchers destroyed, 7 radar installations obliterated, 4 command centers reduced to rubble. Estimated personnel casualties, 143 killed, 287 wounded. Material losses, $640 million in hardware and infrastructure. American losses, 0. Don't miss what comes next. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an analysis like this. The strategic implications hit Caracas within the hour. Venezuela's government had gambled on intimidating American naval presence. The calculation was political. Show force, demonstrate sovereignty, challenge U.S. maritime operations. The expectation was that firing missiles would generate diplomatic crisis, international attention, political leverage. What they got was comprehensive military defeat in under 60 minutes. Their entire coastal defense system eliminated. Their most advanced weapons rendered useless. Their naval command infrastructure destroyed. And an American destroyer sitting in international waters completely undamaged. The political calculation collapsed into strategic disaster. The international response came swiftly. The United Nations Security Council convened emergency session at 11 a.m. EST. The United States presented evidence of the unprovoked attack, radar tracks, launch signatures, missile telemetry. The data was irrefutable. Venezuela had initiated hostilities against a U.S. Navy vessel in international waters. The American response was proportional and limited to military targets directly involved in the attack. China and Russia abstained from the Security Council vote. Even nations typically opposed to U.S. military action couldn't defend Venezuela's decision to fire anti-ship missiles at an American destroyer. The resolution passed 13-2. Venezuela was condemned for the attack. Economic sanctions were expanded. Arms embargo was strengthened. The naval warfare lessons spread across every maritime force worldwide. The engagement demonstrated that modern Aegis systems could defeat saturation attacks. 12 simultaneous anti-ship missiles represented significant threat density. The Carney's defenses had eliminated every single one. The implications for naval planners were profound. Coastal defense missiles weren't obsolete, but their effectiveness against advanced Aegis-equipped vessels had declined dramatically. What would you have done when hostile missiles were inbound? Comment your answer below. For Venezuela, the aftermath was economically devastating. The destroyed coastal defense network represented 7 years of military investment. Replacement costs exceeded $800 million, but no nation was willing to sell them new systems. The arms embargo ensured isolation. Their navy couldn't defend territorial waters. Their coast was vulnerable. The strategic position had deteriorated catastrophically. The political fallout inside Venezuela was immediate. Military commanders questioned the decision to fire. Intelligence assessments had been wrong. The Carney's defensive capabilities had been underestimated. The American response had been faster and more devastating than predicted. Defense Minister Carlos Mendoza resigned within 48 hours. 3 admirals were removed from command. The entire coastal defense strategy required complete revision. But the real damage was to credibility. Venezuela had challenged American naval power and been decisively defeated. Regional adversaries noted the outcome. Cuba adjusted its maritime strategy. Nicaragua reconsidered its naval posture. Even friendly nations understood the message. Attacking U.S. Navy vessels results in overwhelming retaliation. The USS Carney remained on station for 72 hours after the engagement, patrolling, monitoring, demonstrating. The destroyer's presence sent an unmistakable signal. American naval forces would not be intimidated, would not retreat, would not accept hostile action without response. The ship's combat systems remained at full readiness, every sensor active, every weapon system ready. Support the channel by giving this video a thumbs up if you found it valuable. The Aegis Baseline. 10 Systems combat debut exceeded all expectations. The engagement data was transmitted to Naval Sea Systems Command within hours. Engineers analyzed every aspect of the defensive performance. The AN/SPY-6 radar had detected threats at maximum range. The SM-2 missiles had achieved 100% kill probability. The automated response protocols had functioned flawlessly. The system worked exactly as designed under real combat conditions. 3 more Arleigh Burke-class destroyers were scheduled for Baseline 10 upgrades within 6 months. The USS John Finn, the USS Ralph Johnson, the USS Thomas Hudner. Each ship would receive the same modifications as the Carney. The Navy's confidence in the system was total, combat-proven, battle-tested, validated against live threats. The cost-exchange ratio favored the United States overwhelmingly. Venezuela fired 12 missiles worth $340 million total investment. The Carney expended 36 SM-2s costing $43.2 million and 12 Tomahawks costing $22.8 million. American expenditure, $66 million. Venezuelan losses, $640 million in destroyed infrastructure, plus the original missile investment. The economic mathematics of the engagement demonstrated American military efficiency. For naval strategists, the Caribbean engagement became immediate case study material. The Naval War College in Newport added it to curriculum within 2 weeks. Analysis focused on 3 critical elements. First, the effectiveness of layered missile defense. Second, the importance of technological superiority in sensor systems. Third, the strategic value of proportional but devastating response to hostile action. The engagement also demonstrated the changing nature of naval power. Modern destroyers weren't just ships. They were integrated weapons platforms with AI-assisted defensive systems capable of autonomous response. The Carney's combat system had detected, tracked, prioritized, and engaged 12 simultaneous threats faster than human operators could process the information. That computational advantage represented the future of naval warfare. Regional powers watching the engagement drew sobering conclusions. Coastal defense missiles weren't the deterrent they once appeared. Advanced Aegis systems could defeat saturation attacks that should theoretically overwhelm point defenses. The technology gap between American naval capabilities and regional forces had widened. Any nation considering hostile action against U.S. Navy vessels needed to recalculate the odds. This kind of detailed tactical breakdown takes hours to research. Subscribe to help us keep making them. The Venezuelan government attempted diplomatic recovery. Official statements claimed the missile launch was unauthorized. Rogue military commanders, technical malfunction, communication errors. Every excuse deployed to avoid accepting responsibility. But the evidence contradicted every claim. 12 missiles don't launch simultaneously by accident. Coastal defense batteries don't fire without explicit authorization. The attack was deliberate. The consequences were deserved. American diplomatic response was measured but firm. The State Department demanded formal apology, reparations for the cost of defensive munitions, guarantee of no future hostile actions. Venezuela complied with all demands within 5 days. The apology was public. The reparations payment was $70 million. The guarantee was written into emergency legislation passed by their National Assembly. The speed of Venezuelan capitulation demonstrated the effectiveness of immediate military response. Diplomatic negotiations might have dragged for months. Economic sanctions would take time to impose real pressure. But cruise missiles destroying coastal defenses within an hour produced instant political results. The lesson wasn't subtle. It wasn't nuanced. It was absolute. For the crew of the USS Carney, the engagement became part of naval history. Every sailor aboard could claim combat experience. The ship's name would appear in naval warfare textbooks. Their performance under fire had been flawless. 0 mistakes, 0 hesitation, 0 casualties. Professional naval operations at the highest standard. Commander Morrison received the Bronze Star for his leadership during the engagement. 12 Combat Information Center personnel received Navy Achievement Medals. The entire crew received Combat Action Ribbons, recognition for performing their duties under hostile fire, recognition for validating American naval superiority. The engagement's final lesson was about deterrence. Military power exists to prevent conflict through strength. But when deterrence fails, response must be immediate, overwhelming, and successful. The Carney demonstrated all 3 principles. Venezuelan missiles pose genuine threat. American defenses eliminated that threat completely. American retaliation destroyed the capability to repeat the attack. Was this Venezuelan attack a political miscalculation or deliberate provocation? Leave your thoughts in the comments. 3 months after the engagement, the Caribbean Sea returned to routine operations. Commercial shipping resumed normal patterns. Cruise ships returned to Venezuelan ports. The crisis passed into history. But the lessons remained fresh. The wreckage of Venezuelan coastal defenses served as permanent reminder. The data from the Carney's combat systems informed every subsequent Aegis upgrade. If you made it this far, you're the core of our community. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Modern naval warfare demands technological excellence, sensor superiority, weapons system reliability, crew training, command decision-making under pressure. The USS Carney exemplified every requirement. 56 minutes of combat validated decades of investment in naval capabilities, validated the Aegis concept, validated American maritime strategy. The Venezuelan government never rebuilt their coastal defense network. The economic cost was prohibitive. The strategic value was questionable. Why invest hundreds of millions in systems proven ineffective against American destroyers? The calculation didn't make sense. Their navy focused instead on patrol boats and humanitarian missions. The age of challenging U.S. Navy supremacy in their waters had ended. Regional maritime dynamics shifted accordingly. Nations understood the new reality. American naval power wasn't just superior, it was overwhelming. The technology gap couldn't be bridged with numbers or tactics. The only rational response was cooperation, partnership, respect for international maritime law. The Caribbean engagement demonstrated something fundamental about military power. Technology matters, training matters, but the will to use force decisively when threatened matters most. Venezuela fired first, America fired last. The engagement ended with one side completely defeated and the other completely unharmed. That's not luck, that's superiority. What's your take on modern naval missile defense systems? What other naval engagements should we cover next? Your engagement directly shapes what we cover next. Drop a comment and subscribe. The Pacific is watching. The Atlantic is watching. Every naval force globally is watching. The lesson from 73 miles north of Venezuela echoes across every ocean. Challenge American naval power and face the consequences. Those consequences arrive at Mach 3.5 from SM-2 missiles. They arrive at Mach 0.74 from Tomahawk cruise missiles. They arrive with precision that eliminates threats and destroys capabilities. The USS Carney proved that modern destroyers are more than ships. They're mobile fortresses with defensive systems that redefine naval warfare. They're platforms that can defend against saturation attacks and retaliate with devastating accuracy. They're symbols of American commitment to freedom of navigation and maritime law. And when 12 missiles launch toward that symbol, the response will be swift, the defense will be perfect, and the retaliation will be total. That's the standard. That's the capability. That's the message sent on March 8, 2025, in the Caribbean Sea. The Carney remains operational. The systems remain ready. The crew remains vigilant, and every potential adversary remains warned. Test American naval power at your peril. The technology is proven. The training is superior. The response is guaranteed.